He thought the night's patrol was over, that the woods had finally gone quiet, until a terrified girl whispered the words that froze his blood. "He's still out here," and as the shadows stirred, only the K9 stood firm, guarding the path between safety and danger. The trail didn't start so much as it emerged, two faint scars through leaf litter, the kind you only see when you shine a light at an angle and the forest decides to give up one of its secrets. Ethan Cole knew this path better than most. It ran like a quiet vein behind the houses on the north ridge, then bent toward the creek and the old footbridge that every kid in town swore was haunted. To him, it wasn't haunted, it was practical. It let him move from the subdivision to the park boundary without touching the road, without waking up the kind of attention that came with engines and headlines. Beside him padded the only thing in the world that matched his stride, a German shepherd named Rex, black saddle sharp as a stencil against tan, the kind of dog that could make a grown man reconsider a bad idea with one look. Rex's nose was low, drawing a map out of scent and damp and the passing of small lives, mice, fox, raccoon, everything that had traveled here since dusk. His ears flicked as if tuning a radio. Every so often he'd glance up at Ethan, checking that the pack leader was still the pack leader. "Easy, boy," Ethan said, more habit than instruction. "We do the loop, then home." Home meant the cabin at the edge of the trees, a porch light he intentionally left on, a coffee mug Margaret had once insisted was too ugly to throw away. He held on to ugly things that worked. He held on to patrols long after anyone asked him to. It kept his hands busy and his head clean. The night was a good one for walking. A thin mist crawled the ground like a curious animal, hugging roots and stones. Above, the half-moon sifted through bare branches. The wind was lazy and unambitious, sound carried. Far behind them, a screen door had slammed at 9 o'clock sharp, Mr. Delaney's nightly argument with his porch. Far ahead, the creek whispered at its own business, the water low this early in the season but opinionated anyway. Rex halted without warning. It wasn't a dramatic freeze, it was the stilled, concentrated stop of a professional considering a new piece of information. His tail fixed at half-mast. His paws settled silently. His head pivoted a few degrees to the right. Ethan let his weight settle into the balls of his feet. He didn't talk. Words are clumsy when you need edges. He followed the line of the dog's muzzle into a pocket of black just off the trail, under cedar, where pine needles ate light. He listened. Beyond their own breathing, beyond the far creek, there was something. Not a footfall. Not a branch snap. The absence of small noises, as if the woods were holding their breath around one particular spot. "Show," he whispered. Rex eased forward, shoulder brushing Ethan's knee, and started a slow, confident approach. The leash hung loose, not that he needed it. 6 years together had turned corrections into a glance, commands into muscle memory. As they reached the edge of shadow, the shape became a fact, a person, small, orbited by cold air that didn't match the night. Ethan lowered the beam of his flashlight so it brushed the ground in front of the figure rather than its face. Light is a blunt instrument unless you know how to use it. "I see you," he said, letting calm sit in his voice. "We're here to help." Silence. And then the shape uncurled. Not all at once, one joint at a time, as if each had to remember how to exist. A girl slid into the edge of light. 12, maybe. 13 if life had made her older faster. Her hair clung in damp ropes along her cheeks. Her jacket, someone else's, too big, hung open, one sleeve torn at the cuff. Her hands were empty, but tucked in close like she'd been hugging herself for hours and only now realized it. Rex sat. Perfect. Not a lunge, not a growl. A sit that said he was a wall that did not need to move to be a wall. His ears swiveled, listening for the thing she had been listening for. The girl flinched when the beam licked her boots. She lifted her eyes, storm gray, wide in a way that made Ethan's chest hitch. Fear does that to children, it pushes their eyes open too far, as if they're trying to pull in enough light to make the world behave. It's okay, Ethan said. He kept the flashlight low, the tone low, the number of words low. My name's Ethan. This is Rex. You're on a safe trail. Her lips parted, but nothing came. She glanced past him, down the path they just walked, then behind her toward the creek. The glance wasn't random. It sketched a circle. Rex's nose lifted. He drew one slow breath, then another, then cut a look up to Ethan he only used when information mattered. There's more than us. What's your name? Ethan tried. Are you hurt? She shook her head at the first question, then hesitated, maybe at the second, then shook again. He saw the way her weight didn't sit fully on her left foot. Not hurt, then. Pushed. Do you live nearby? He asked. We can walk you home. Her voice finally found itself. It arrived as a thread pulled through cloth, barely there. No, she said, and the single syllable trembled with a story trying to escape. I can't. Okay, Ethan said immediately, quick to remove pressure. Not home. Somewhere safe. There's a ranger station 1.5 miles by the creek. A road crossing in half that. A house on the ridge with lights on. He gave options like you give someone a map, in scale, in sequence. She didn't choose one. She was looking past him again, to the right of the trail. Rex followed the look, then pushed himself into a stand, slow and purposeful. His tail thickened into a banner. His breath went quiet. For a heartbeat Ethan thought the woods themselves had leaned closer. The girl's voice came again, smaller this time, as if she was afraid of triggering something with sound. He's still out here. 3 words, then 3 more, and the temperature of the world shifted under Ethan's boots. Words are coordinates when they come from the right place. He's still out here. Not I think, not maybe. A report. A fact sent across a dark field to the only other living mind in range. Who? Ethan asked, but he asked it gently, like you ask a sleeping baby to stay sleeping. His left hand slid the flashlight a fraction, catching bark and fern and the negative space between. His right hand lowered to Rex's collar, not to hold him back but to feel the truth in the dog's muscles. The girl swallowed. Her breath fogged. The mist near the ground stirred as if disturbed by something more than wind. She didn't look at Ethan when she answered. She looked at the path. The man from the road, she whispered. I ran when the truck stopped. I ran into the trees. He followed to the bridge and then I hid and waited and she shut her eyes, forcing the next piece out. He never left. He just stopped moving where I couldn't see him anymore. Predators learn stillness. Ethan knew this. He didn't let the knowing show. How long? He asked. I don't know, she said. It was dark and then darker. I counted my heart until it hurt. I don't know. Rex's ears ticked back and forth, forward, back, forward. He inhaled again, pulling scent like thread. His head angled toward the footbridge, then swung back to the trail they'd come from, undecided in a way that had nothing to do with uncertainty and everything to do with multi-source input. Something had been in both places. Recently. Ethan triangulated. His mind laid the night over a small map of the land, the road to the west, the creek east, the ridge north, the empty lots south where the developer ran out of money. If someone waited, the obvious spots were the blind corners, the footbridge, where the creek made a soft racket that covered dumb noise, and the S-curve by the cedar snag, where the trail pinched and forced single file. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. Okay, he said. We don't go back the way we came. We don't give anyone a funnel. We take the ridgeline. It's loud underfoot, dry leaves will talk for us, and we keep the creek to our left for sound. We stay on the crown where sight lines are better. We move slow. We don't silhouette. The girl's face didn't change. She was trying to take in too much math. He eased it. "Do you see this dog?" he asked, tipping his head toward Rex. "He tells me when the dark is lying. He will not let anyone step on this path unless I say so. You stand behind him. You keep one hand on his back if you're scared. That's what he's for. You listen for bells, mine." He lifted his wrist. The small carabiner on his watch band held 3 tiny brass jingle bells. Stupid looking, he knew. Effective anyway. "If I shake these, you crouch. You don't run ahead. You don't look back. You crouch and you put both hands on the dirt and you breathe twice, slow. Can you do that?" She blinked once. Twice. Then nodded slowly. Her hands unclenched a fraction. "Good," Ethan said, and his voice carried practiced certainty now, not for bravado but because certainty is insulation on a live wire. "We're going to step back onto the path. Rex will take point. I'll angle the light low so it doesn't paint us. You will be between us. We will walk like we're boring." The corner of her mouth almost moved at that last word. Not a smile. A ghost of the memory that smiles used to be possible. He offered his hand. Not to take hers, he held it out, palm up, for inspection. She looked at it like a contract. After a few seconds, she touched her fingertips to it, 1, 2, 5 quick points, and withdrew. He didn't ask for more. Consent was a gate he would open only when it opened itself. "Rex," he said. The dog looked up, eyes bright, all business. "Path." Rex stepped forward, placing his front paws onto the compacted dirt. His gait changed, every pad landed like a comma instead of a period, punctuation for sentences he was reading with his nose. Ethan followed a half step behind and to the right, keeping his own feet in his old prints where he could, cutting new ones only when he wanted to make someone think 2 people had become one. The girl fell in between them, her light shoes whispering against leaf litter. She gathered her borrowed jacket around herself, tucking her chin into it until only those gray eyes watched the world. The mist thickened where the path dipped, then thinned as it rose. Crickets discovered their courage again and said so. Somewhere to the left, the creek argued with a rock about where to go next. They passed the cedar snag. Its black column rose up like a punctuation mark at the edge of the light. Rex slowed, nose sweeping. Ethan's fingers found the bells and steadied them so they wouldn't speak accidentally. He angled the flashlight so the beam cut across the ground at ankle height. If someone lay prone ahead, shadow would betray them before shape did. The path constricted and then widened as it approached the footbridge. The bridge itself, old planks, older bolts, newer graffiti, waited like a question. Beyond it, the trees crowded close again, a mouth wanting to close around an answer. Rex halted at the bridge's lip and put his nose through the gap in the rail, pulling wind that had traveled down the creek like mail. He went statue still. Ethan's heart ticked once, heavy. He didn't need a bark. He didn't need a growl. The stillness was the message, he's still out here. The girl had stopped breathing. He could feel the absence of it like a change in pressure behind him. "Okay," Ethan breathed, so quiet even the night had to lean in. "Then we changed the test." He took a slow step forward, and without raising the light, he let it glance off the bridge's first plank. A boot print, darker because it was wet longer, arced at the edge. Fresh. Not his. Not hers. Another print paired to it sat deeper in the wood, heavier man, more weight on the outside of the foot, someone who favored a knee. Not stationary, then. Patient. Moving, then stopping, then moving. Listening. Rex shifted weight to his hind legs. A subtle move only Ethan would read. It meant readiness. It meant the difference between a dog that would chase and a dog that would bar. Ethan looked down the span of the bridge into the trees. Mist lay thick there like a closed curtain. Beyond it, the trail kinked right, then left, the exact geometry that turns men into problems. Ethan touched the bells and made them speak one time. The girl crouched as instructed, hands on the dirt, breath, 1, 2. Rex stepped sideways until his body blocked the opening of the bridge entirely, chest square to the far side, eyes cutting into the fog like beams, a living barricade on a narrow road. In that thin pause, with the creek arguing under the boards and the mist pretending to be innocent, the forest did what it always does when it knows something's about to happen. It waited. And in the waiting, a twig far ahead snapped with the carelessness of someone who believed waiting made them invisible. Rex didn't bark. He didn't need to. He lowered his head a fraction and showed the kind of teeth that decided nights. The path was guarded. The creek beneath the bridge rattled against its rocks as if impatient. Ethan stood just behind Rex, his hand grazing the shepherd's fur, feeling the tension in each muscle. The dog was a wire pulled taut, humming with energy, yet still, waiting, calculating. Dogs didn't waste motion. When Rex froze like this, Ethan knew there was a man beyond the mist. Emily crouched low, just as he'd told her, fingers pressing the dirt, knuckles pale. She looked impossibly small against the hulking bridge rail, like a bird that had crash-landed mid-flight. Her breath came shallow, a tremor Ethan could feel even without turning to look at her. She'd followed the instruction, yes, but it wasn't just obedience. It was survival baked into her bones. She'd done this before. Hidden. Waited. Hoped. A twig cracked again. Closer. Then silence. The kind of silence that wasn't absence, but presence pretending. Ethan angled his flashlight subtly, just enough to catch the rails. The wood gleamed with moisture, but further ahead, the beam snagged on something out of place, a flash of fabric, too straight to be vine, too dark to be bark. Shadow discipline, Ethan muttered under his breath, a soldier's phrase Rex had heard 100 times. The shepherd crouched slightly, shifting his weight, but didn't lunge. His growl rolled low, like distant thunder. Ethan bent closer to Emily, his voice a whisper soft enough to ride only to her ear. He's real. And he's waiting. We'll handle it. You stay still. No matter what happens, don't run. Running makes you a target. Understand? Emily's eyes darted up, gray and stormy, brimming with fear but lit with a spark that told Ethan she was still listening. She nodded quickly, clutching the stuffed rabbit tighter. The voice came from the fog then, sudden and jarring, bouncing strange against the creek. Come out. Don't make me ask again. It was male, deep, but worn thin with irritation. Too casual to be bluff. He'd been waiting here, confident she'd make her way along this path eventually. Emily flinched, pressing her face into her rabbit. It's him, she mouthed, barely audible. Ethan felt the years press down on him. He had heard this tone before, in deserts and alleyways and camps where men who thought themselves predators demanded obedience. He'd buried friends who underestimated it. But he'd also seen how fast power collapsed when someone refused to flinch. He stepped forward slowly, letting his boots hit the planks of the bridge with deliberate weight. The wood groaned under him, carrying his presence outward like a warning. Rex advanced in sync, a living shadow glued to Ethan's side, lips still curled, teeth catching the moonlight. You picked the wrong night, Ethan called, his voice calm but edged. And the wrong trail. A chuckle floated back, low and ugly. Old man with a dog. Brave. Hand her over, and I walk away. She don't belong to you. She doesn't belong to you either, Ethan shot back, his words sharp enough to cut. The fog thickened as if trying to erase the space between them. Ethan could make out the man now, broad-shouldered, crouched near the bend of the path, a crowbar glinting faintly in one hand. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed. A hunter who thought he had the advantage. Ethan's grip tightened on the flashlight. He had a bat strapped to his pack, but drawing it meant telegraphing. Right now, words were his shield. You think she'll run back to you if you scare her enough? Ethan said, buying time. Look again. He angled his body so Emily was hidden behind him and Rex. The shepherd let out another growl, this one vibrating so deep the boards beneath Ethan's boots seemed to hum. The man shifted, his bravado faltering for just a blink. Dog won't stop a bullet, the man sneered. But it'll stop you before you fire it, Ethan replied smoothly. And then the only sound you'll hear is bones breaking. The standoff stretched, taut as wire. Ethan felt Emily press against his back now, trembling but steady, her whisper trembling upward, he doesn't stop. He waits. He likes the waiting. Ethan understood then. This wasn't random. This man hunted her for sport. He wanted her fear stretched thin and pulled taut. That was his game. And breaking games required flipping the rules. Ethan slid his hand into his jacket pocket and rattled the small bells on his wrist with a deliberate shake. The sound was delicate, harmless on its own, but paired with Rex's shift, it became signal. The shepherd lowered further, eyes locked, and then barked once. Not the friendly bark of a dog announcing himself. This was primal, a shot across a battlefield. The forest itself seemed to flinch. Birds erupted from a tree, scattering like ash. The man cursed and shuffled back a step, his crowbar clanking against stone. His silhouette in the fog bent with indecision. Not so fun when the prey's got teeth, is it? Ethan said, voice flat and merciless. The man hesitated another second, then retreated into the mist, his footsteps crunching along the opposite bank, retreat disguised as regrouping. Ethan didn't move until the sound dissolved into the creek's chatter. Only then did he glance at Emily. We move. Now. She stumbled to her feet, eyes wide, clutching her rabbit like a lifeline. Rex kept pace, his body brushing her knees, guiding her like he understood his role as both shield and compass. Ethan led them across the bridge, each plank creaking like a groan of protest. His flashlight beam danced low, catching new boot prints, fresh and scattered, confirming what his gut already knew, this wasn't over. The man hadn't run away. He'd simply repositioned. And as they stepped off the far side, Emily whispered again, voice breaking but resolute. He's still out here. This time, Ethan didn't need convincing. He felt it in the trees, in Rex's growl, in the way the night itself seemed to lean closer. The creek's chatter faded behind them until it became part of the night's wallpaper, present, but no longer the loudest thing in the room. On this side of the bridge, the trail climbed, threading between black-barked maple and a stand of hemlock that drank the moonlight and gave none back. The ridge line waited above like a shelf of safety, louder underfoot, easier to read, but the slope to get there was a switchback of narrow cuts that forced single file and punished hesitation. Ethan put Rex on a silent hand signal, point, and the shepherd took the narrow path first, placing each paw like a chess piece. The dog's tail was down, not tucked, working tail, not panicked tail. He hugged the uphill edge so his body would be a barrier if something lunged from below. Ethan followed half a step back, flashlight angled to lick the ground at shin height, and Emily slid in between, one hand gripping the droop of Rex's ruff as instructed, the other hand squeezing the rabbit until its threadbare ear made a tiny, desperate squeak. Breathe in for 4, out for 4, Ethan whispered, just loud enough for Emily's hearing and for Rex's training to register calm handler. Match my feet. If I stop, you go still. If I tap your shoulder twice, crouch. If I say down, you drop to dirt, belly and hands. Copy? Emily nodded. Copy. Her voice surprised him. It carried, not loud, but with the kind of steadiness kids find when they are done being afraid and have moved into the math of surviving. The fog thinned on the slope but clung in the low spots, pooling like water. Sound traveled strangely, too close, then too far. Twice Ethan stopped them with a palm and let the woods speak. Once it was only a deer, hoofs tapping rock as it ghosted along a parallel run. Once it was wind finding a chime someone had hung at a cabin porch a quarter mile away. Each time, Rex's ears gave the verdict before Ethan's brain finished its calculus. Behind them, at a distance that refused to commit, a boot found a root and corrected. Not loud. Not careless. Just there. Pace change, Ethan murmured. We're going to bleed speed. Make them impatient. He shortened his stride, then quickened it for 3 steps, then shortened again, uncomfortable to follow, designed to break a tail's rhythm. A hunter behind them who liked waiting would hate this. Rage makes men clumsy. Emily matched him, breath sinking to his count. Why do we go slower? She asked. Because questions are how you learn to own fear instead of rent it. Because speed is a noise, Ethan said. And because we want him to choose the wrong place to show himself. They reached the first switchback, a tight right-hander around a moss-draped stump that forced you to turn your back on the downslope for a second. Ethan signaled Rex to post. The shepherd slid ahead and planted on the outer edge, chest square to the downslope, holding that world at bay while Emily and then Ethan made the turn inside his shield. On the far side of the bend, Ethan palmed 3 dry leaves into a thin stack and tucked them under the edge of a rock at ankle height. If anyone brushed that rock in a rush, the leaves would sigh, quiet to most ears, loud to trained ones. Primitive tripwire. They climbed again. The ridge presented itself in slices between trunks, a pale stripe of sky growing broader, a promise of breath. Ethan's internal map rotated like a compass card. Ridge crown, then cut left to the utility line clear cut, then a diagonal toward the old fire road. If they could reach that gravel within the hour, the geometry of the night would stop favoring the shadow. Rex halted without the drama of alarm, just a freeze and a tiny tilt of the head downhill. Ethan felt rather than heard what the dog heard, a second set of trailing steps. Lighter. Different cadence. Not the man from the bridge. Another person shadowing the shadow, range outside of stone throw, inside of shout. Parallel or offset. Hard to tell with the slope throwing sound. 2, Ethan breathed. He could have kept that to himself. He didn't. Information is respect. Stay on the dog. Emily's hand tightened, but her feet didn't stutter. He's not alone, she said. It wasn't a question. Not tonight, Ethan agreed. But neither are you. They reached the second switchback, a left-hand bend around a blowdown where roots clawed at the air like a frozen wave. The trail narrowed to the width of a boot. Ethan's plan shifted a click. Here, the terrain favored an ambush from above, rocks for cover, an easy 2-step to drop into the trail with momentum. So they did the opposite of what an ambusher expects. Ethan stopped them in the open 2 strides before the bend. He touched the bells, one soft chime, and they sank as one, knees bent, weight in the balls of their feet, eyes up the slope. He let the silence expand like a held breath. The forest took the cue and held with him. Somewhere downhill, a barred owl asked its old question, "Who cooks for you?" and received no answer. Rex's nose painted a lazy figure 8 in the air. His ears triangulated in absence on the uphill rock shelf, a void where chipmunk and moth dared not. Ethan saw it too, not a shape, but a wrongness. Night isn't a color, it's a texture. It changes where men are. He angled the flashlight so its edge just kissed the rock. The beam caught a line that wasn't a line of nature, a scuffed rubber edge where a boot had dragged. Recent. He let the light drift off as if it had been an accident. He did not look at Emily. He didn't need to. He felt her knowing. Break his patience, Ethan whispered to Rex. It wasn't a formal command, but the dog knew Ethan's late-night language. Rex's tail flicked once, the only tell he allowed the dark, and he took 2 steps forward and stared, hard, into where the man would be if the man were the kind of man who liked high ground. Nothing moved. Then a wordless, half-breathed curse scraped the rock. Patience broke first. A small stone skittered. The shelf sent down the slope. The second follower below misread the pebble's speech and shifted to adjust, boots brushing fern, announcing themselves to the one above. Predators hate losing control. Ethan could have smiled if smiling didn't cost attention. "We step and pass," he said. "No runs. No heroics." He stood in one smooth motion and moved them through the bend. Rex took the outer line again, body a living gait. They entered a stretch of trail where mountain laurel drew their stiff, glossy leaves into a narrow hallway. The branches penned the path like elbows. The air smelled green and sweet and damp in a way that would be pleasant at noon and felt predatory at night. Emily's shoulder brushed laurel. It whispered against her jacket, a small sound that, tonight, sounded like a flare. "Short steps," Ethan said. "He'll try to make us choose, forward into him or back into him." He lifted the flashlight 2 inches, then lowered it, letting the beam purl and collapse like a ripple, enough to pull the eye without giving the eye a target. The ridge was 20 vertical feet above, but here at the laurel choke it might as well have been a mile. Ethan listened out of the corners of his hearing. To their rear, the heavier man had matched their slow pace, then rushed 3 steps in irritation, then stopped. Above, the lighter one repositioned again, closer now, perhaps 20 yards, his breath a faint burr on the slope when he forgot to breathe through his nose. Rex's hackles rose, not a crest, just a roughening. He gave one small grunt. "Now." "Left bank," Ethan said. "Not military, but close. We cheat the uphill shoulder. Hands up to guard your face." He moved, angling them with elbows tucked, letting laurel scrape his sleeves instead of his skin. A branch snapped to their right, knee-height. The heavier man had committed to a cross-angle approach. He thought they'd bolt forward into the man above. Instead, they pressed left and bled speed to a stop, turning hard in unison so that Rex faced downslope and Ethan faced upslope and Emily stayed in the V of their bodies. The night unveiled the upper predator at last. He stepped out from behind a hemlock trunk with the lazy confidence of a man who thought he'd engineered inevitabilities, a short pry bar in his right hand and a knife in the other, a narrow blade, 2 fingers long, the kind of thing belt clips hide badly. He had the kind of smile that tended to grow on men who never got caught in photographs, thin, tilted, practiced. "Road ends here," he said. "Trade the girl for a quiet night." Rex made a low sound that was almost a laugh if laughter could be angry. Behind, the heavy boots thumped twice closer on the right. The pincer tried to close. Ethan did 3 things at once. He let the head of his flashlight drop so its weight swung. He rattled the bells, a single staccato that meant drop, and he stepped 1 foot forward, owning a patch of dirt that turned a narrow hallway into a fight on his terms. Emily went down smoothly, belly to earth, hands open on leaf litter. Rex flowed sideways until his shoulders filled the narrowest width of the path, a cork in a bottle. The upslope man realized too late that he had underestimated the dumbness of his own plan. He could not leap without landing on dog. He could not stab without committing his wrist below the level of Rex's teeth. He could not retreat without turning his ankles. He settled for menace. "Last chance, old." Ethan cut the sentence in half by flicking his flashlight on directly into the man's eyes for half a heartbeat and off again. The burst didn't blind him long, it didn't need to. It stole a flinch, and flinches buy time. Ethan slid into that tiny purchase and brought the flashlight's head up in a tight, efficient arc, not at a skull, which breaks and buys problems, but at the wrist that held the knife. Metal met metal and bone. The knife clanged into laurel and vanished. The pry bar came up too slow, Rex's movement erased it. The shepherd surged 1 step with a forward bark that snapped spittle into the air and put the man's courage on a ledge. Downslope, the heavier man surged, sure that chaos above meant weakness below. Emily kept her head down, she had learned, so she did not see the shape that moved between her and the lower man. She felt it in the earth instead, a shock through dirt as boots planted and then skidded. The lower attacker had hit Ethan's rock and leaf tripwire from the first switchback. No magic, just a small betrayal of footing. His balance broke, and he grabbed for laurel that didn't love him back. He fell to one knee with a curse that handed his position to the knight and to Rex's other ear. "Enough," Ethan said, and for the first time tonight he let command roll through him like an old friend. "You will step back. You will put both hands where I can see them. You will not speak unless I ask a question. If you do anything else, you will not like what happens." The upslope man blinked hard, knife gone, pry bar sagging. He wasn't used to being told you will in a tone that had nothing to prove. He wasn't used to dogs that didn't bluff. He hesitated, and that was all the knight needed to change teams. A new sound slid into the scene from the left, the brittle tick of small stones under rubber soles, fast and sure. Not the heavy man. Not the upslope one. A third set of feet, closing from a flank Ethan hadn't seen, because the forest loves a plot twist. The stride was light, balanced, informed. A woman's silhouette broke the edge of the path, lean and hooded, hands empty but not harmless. "Move," she snapped to the men, voice cold and efficient. "We're burned. Back to the road." The upslope man's chin twitched across a plan Ethan could almost read: use her arrival as distraction, push the dog, snatch the kid, vanish downhill. But Rex read it faster. The shepherd took one half-step forward, just enough to put the man's thigh inside the geometry of his teeth, and showed him a future he didn't want. The man's plan died without being born. "Go," the woman hissed again, more to the knight than to them. "Now." For a breath, nobody moved. Then the heavy man below broke first, stumbling backward, boots grinding gravel, fear finally catching up with arrogance. The upslope man followed, eyes on Rex the whole time, the pry bar lowering, his breath coming in a ragged hiss. The woman covered their retreat like a professional, no wasted motion, no heroic stare-downs, just backward steps that never crossed each other and put brush between her and the flashlight's threat. Ethan didn't chase. He didn't advance. He didn't throw a word after them. He held the space the way you hold a door for someone you love, purposefully, and he counted the retreating steps the way he counted breaths, 1, 2, 4, 8, until the noise slid down into the creek's conversation and got lost on purpose. He waited 10 more heartbeats, because waiting is a weapon. Then he said, quietly, "Up," and Emily rose, leaves clinging to her sleeves like medals. She looked smaller and bigger all at once, smaller in the body, bigger in the way eyes hold the world after you tell it no. Rex shook once, a soft thunder of loose fur and adrenaline leaving the room, then turned to Ethan and bumped his thigh with his head. "We held it." Ethan rubbed the notch behind the dog's left ear, "the place that meant I saw you do it." "Was she with them last time?" Ethan asked, eyes still on the dark where the woman had vanished. Emily swallowed. I heard a woman before. Not like her. Laughing. This one didn't laugh. "This one plans," Ethan said. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the years and the night and the weight of a choice harden into duty. "And planners come back. Then where do we go?" Emily asked. It wasn't defeat. It was logistics, the kind of question you get to ask when you've earned another hour. "Ridge," Ethan said. Then the utility cut. Then the old fire road. "We call it in when we've got sky." He took one last look down into the trees. He could feel them out there, anger moving in a small circle, blaming the dog, blaming the old man, never blaming the math. The night had surrendered a round, not the fight. "Stay on, Rex," he said, and they moved again, the laurel parting grudgingly, the slope easing under their boots. Above, the ridge's pale stripe widened, stars showed through where the trunks thinned. The world was changing color by degrees. The path didn't feel safe yet. But guarded? Yes. Guarded by a dog who had learned the shape of danger and decided he liked the shape of them more. Behind, far off, a crow called once, the rough, throat-scrape sound crows use when they've seen something worth telling the day about. It sounded like a warning and a beginning. They climbed into it. The ridge rose at last, the slope easing as the trail broke into a crown of dry leaves and brittle twigs. Up here, sound was a language that carried far, every step cracked, every shift of weight spoke into the open. Ethan preferred it that way. Predators rely on silence, ridges betray them. Rex crested first, his paws crunching the leaf carpet. He paused, nose working, then glanced back, clear for the moment. Emily followed, her jacket dragging leaves like a whispering tale. She had learned not to stumble. Her breath still shivered in her throat, but it came in rhythm now, for in, for out, the way Ethan had told her. She was beginning to match the pace of men who survive. The view opened. To the left, the utility cut slashed the ridge, a wide corridor of gravel and stunted scrub where towers marched like skeletons toward the horizon. To the right, the forest thickened again, swallowing any view of the creek below. The moonlight poured freely here, unbothered by canopy, lighting the path as if the world itself wanted them visible. "Pause," Ethan said, raising his hand. They stopped as one. He turned a slow circle, scanning, ears pulling the night in. Far behind, he thought he caught the faint pop of brush, someone adjusting position, maybe 50 yards down the slope. Ahead, nothing yet. The ridge was theirs, but not for long. Emily hugged her rabbit. "They're still following, aren't they?" "Yes," Ethan said. He didn't soften it. She deserved the truth spoken plainly. "But up here, they can't hide their feet. That gives us the edge." She swallowed hard. "They don't quit. Neither do we." He knelt so his eyes met hers. "Listen carefully. Fear makes you want to run fast. Running fast makes noise. Noise feeds them. You stay slow, you stay measured, and you let Rex carry the fear for you. That's his job." Her eyes flicked to the dog. Rex stood statuesque, ears high, gaze locked down the ridgeline. He looked like he was carved out of the night itself, a sentinel planted here for centuries. Emily's hand slid toward his fur almost unconsciously, pressing into the coarse ruff. His warmth steadied her better than any word. "Good," Ethan said, rising. "We move to the cut. Keep the towers in sight." They stepped onto the gravel corridor, their boots crunching in unison. The open space felt strange after so much shadow, like standing in the aisle of a cathedral with the roof torn away. Moonlight made their shadows long and thin, spilling across scrub and rock. Emily shivered, pulling the quilted jacket tighter. Halfway across, Rex froze again. This time, his nose tilted high, pulling air rather than ground. His body stiffened, tail straight, hackles rising in a crest that caught silver light. He let out a sharp bark, deep enough to vibrate the gravel. Ethan followed his line of sight. At the far side of the cut, where the forest swallowed the corridor again, stood a figure. Not crouched, not hiding. Standing. Watching. Moonlight etched the silhouette clearly, the tall man from the bridge, broad shoulders unmistakable. He hadn't come alone. To his left, the lean woman leaned against a tower strut, arms folded. Another shadow shifted behind her, maybe the heavy one who'd slipped earlier. 3, at least. Maybe more waiting in the trees. Emily gasped. "It's them." "Yes," Ethan said, voice steady. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, though his weapon wasn't light or bat, it was time. He measured the distance, the openness, the angles. They'd chosen this spot because it funneled him. But open space cuts both ways. The tall man's voice carried easily across the gravel. "Long walk, old man. Thought you'd quit before here." "Not my style," Ethan called back. "You're not keeping her. Hand her over." Rex barked again, louder, echoing off the towers. The sound shattered the night, scattering unseen owls and waking dogs in distant backyards. The patrol car would hear it. Maybe. If they were close enough. Ethan raised his chin. You've had your chance to walk away. Next step, you answer for it. The woman laughed softly. Big words. You're one man. She's one child. We're a pack. You don't understand what a pack is, Ethan shot back. He reached down, brushing Rex's fur. This is a pack. The standoff stretched. Emily clung to Rex, eyes wide. They won't stop, she whispered again, the mantra of her life. They don't have to, Ethan said quietly. We just have to hold until they break. The heavy one shifted forward a step. Gravel crunched. That was all the signal Ethan needed. He rattled the bells on his wrist, sharp, fast. Rex launched forward 3 steps, not closing distance but owning space, his bark ripping through the cut like thunder. The sound staggered the men back involuntarily, bodies betraying bravado. The woman hissed something under her breath, sharp and angry. Ethan seized the second. Run the line, he barked to Emily, pointing to the towers. Stay tight to Rex. Go! Emily hesitated only a heartbeat, then obeyed, sprinting low alongside the shepherd. Rex matched her stride, his body a shield angled between her and the threats. Ethan followed, flashlight beam flashing briefly across the enemy silhouettes, burning their eyes, stealing seconds. Shouts erupted behind them. Boots hit gravel, crunching fast. A thrown rock clattered off a tower strut with a metallic clang. Another whizzed past, harmless in the dark. But they didn't close. Rex's bark, relentless and feral, kept them at bay. Each time they surged, the shepherd's roar met them like a wall of fire. The girl ran, not aimlessly but guided, her hand brushing Rex's flank, her eyes locked on the next tower like it was salvation. The cut stretched long, but at last, the dark line of trees loomed ahead. Ethan pushed them toward it, heart hammering. Once they reached cover, they'd vanish into the forest's maze again. Behind, the tall man's voice rose, frustrated and furious. You can't keep her forever. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ridge had spoken. The path was still theirs. The trees swallowed them again, and with them the moonlight. The corridor of towers and gravel gave way to pine, damp earth, and a hush that pressed close like a held breath. Ethan slowed them at once. Running in the cut made sense, open air, open lines. Running in woods was suicide, too many roots, too many traps, too much noise. Steady, he murmured, his voice a wire stretched thin between control and urgency. Short steps. Quiet feet. Think fox, not deer. Rex had already adjusted. His bark, thunder in the corridor, was now gone, replaced by silence and a rigid tail that swished only once as he recalibrated to stealth. Emily mirrored the shift, her hand pressed firmly into the shepherd's fur. She was learning, copying the dog, copying Ethan, becoming quieter, smaller, sharper. The stuffed rabbit dangled from her arm like an afterthought, but her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on the path as though memorizing every root and stone. Behind them, the chase was slower. The shouts had stopped. The pursuers had slipped back into silence, a silence that meant persistence, not retreat. Ethan didn't trust silence. It was a hunter's tool, and he knew too well how effective it could be. They reached a small clearing where a dead oak had fallen, its trunk sprawled across the forest floor like a barricade. Ethan gestured for Emily to climb over, then helped her across, his hand steadying her shoulder. Rex vaulted effortlessly, landing without a sound. The girl crouched on the far side, catching her breath. "Why won't they stop?" she whispered, voice trembling. Ethan glanced at her, then at the trees. "Because they think you're still theirs. And they don't know what it feels like to lose." Her lips quivered. "They said no one would believe me. That even if I screamed, no one would come. That I belonged to them." Ethan crouched down, his face level with hers. His flashlight remained dark, but his eyes held a steady flame. "Do you feel Rex under your hand? Do you hear me now? You don't belong to them. Not tonight. Not ever again." She blinked, and a tear cut a clean line through the dirt on her cheek. She nodded, as if forcing herself to believe, then pressed tighter into Rex's fur. The shepherd accepted the weight without complaint, shifting closer until his body formed a wall against her side. Ethan straightened and scanned the clearing. The forest here thinned for 100 yards before thickening again near the fire road. They had to make it across before the pack closed in. "Move," he whispered. They slipped into the open stretch. Every step crunched louder than it should, the dry leaves betraying them. Ethan grit his teeth. There was no way to cross silently. They would have to cross quickly. Halfway through, the night cracked. A branch snapped to their left. Then another. Then the unmistakable crunch of boots circling in. "Keep going," Ethan ordered, his voice sharp now. "Don't stop." Emily's eyes widened, but she obeyed. She gripped Rex tighter, the shepherd guiding her across the clearing like a living compass. From the treeline, a voice sliced through the dark. The tall man again. "You can run all night, old man. She'll be ours by morning." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't waste breath. He pushed Emily forward, his body shielding her from the sound. He counted steps, 20, 15, 10, until the treeline broke again and the fire road yawned before them. It wasn't much, a strip of packed gravel, overgrown with weeds, abandoned years ago. But it was space, and space meant distance. He hustled Emily across, Rex at her side, and only when they reached the far edge did he allow them to stop. Emily collapsed against a tree, chest heaving. They're not stopping," she gasped. "No," Ethan said, scanning the road, "but neither are we." He crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "You need to tell me something, Emily. Why you? Why are they so desperate to keep you?" Her hands twisted the rabbit's ear until the fabric threatened to tear. "Because I saw," she whispered. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Saw what?" Her eyes lifted to his, gray and stormy even in the dim light. "What they do. What they take. I wasn't supposed to see. But I did." Ethan's stomach sank. The pieces fit. This wasn't random. She wasn't just prey, they were trying to erase a witness. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "That means you're even more important to protect. You carry the truth they're terrified of. That's why they can't stop. And that's why we can't either." She nodded, tears spilling but her jaw tightening. For the first time, defiance flickered in her gaze. "Then I'll fight too." Ethan almost smiled, despite the tension. "Good. But your fight is staying alive. That's enough." Rex growled suddenly, low and sharp. Ethan spun. From the opposite treeline, movement. Shadows flitting between trunks. 3 shapes at least. Closing fast. "Up!" Ethan barked. Emily scrambled to her feet, clutching her rabbit. Rex pressed to her side, growl deepening. They bolted down the fire road, gravel spraying beneath their boots. Shouts erupted behind them, anger, pursuit. The pack had committed now, no more games. Ethan's lungs burned, but his stride didn't falter. He knew this road. Ahead, half a mile, was the old ranger station, a husk, maybe, but walls, doors, and the chance of a radio. If they could reach it, they'd have more than running. They'd have a stand. Almost there, he shouted over his shoulder. Emily stumbled but kept going, Rex tugging her forward, his body never leaving her side. Behind them, the pack's boots grew louder, their rage closing in. The fire road stretched ahead, endless in the moonlight, and for the first time, Ethan wondered if they had enough strength left to reach the end. The fire road narrowed, gravel giving way to packed dirt and weeds clawing at the edges. Ethan's stride shortened, every sense sharpening as the outline of the ranger station finally took shape. It was little more than a square shadow squatting at the bend of the road, wooden walls gone gray with rot, roof sagging on one side, windows boarded but broken in places. A relic from a decade ago, when forest fires had swept through this part of the county. Abandoned, forgotten. But tonight, it was a fortress waiting to be tested. Almost there, Ethan said, his voice tight with controlled breath. He wasn't talking to himself, he was feeding Emily fuel to keep her feet moving. The girl stumbled once, her shoe catching on a rock, but Rex nudged her forward with a firm push of his flank. She clutched the dog's fur, rabbit dangling from her other hand, her eyes locked on the dark outline ahead as if it were salvation itself. Behind them, the shouts had grown more distinct. The men weren't bothering with stealth anymore. Their boots pounded the road in rhythm, 3, 4, maybe more. Anger made them loud, and desperation made them reckless. Ethan knew both were dangerous in their own ways. They reached the ranger station's porch, the steps sagging under their combined weight. Ethan shoved the door once, it stuck, swollen from years of rain. He gritted his teeth, leaned his shoulder into it, and forced it open with a groan that echoed through the woods like a scream. Inside, now, he ordered. Emily darted in first, Rex tight behind her. Ethan followed, slamming the door shut. He shoved the broken desk against it, then kicked a chair under the handle for good measure. The room smelled of mildew and dust, but it had 4 walls, a ceiling, and, if only briefly, time. Emily collapsed into a corner, clutching her rabbit. Her breaths came fast and shallow, but her eyes were fixed on Ethan, waiting, needing him to tell her what came next. Rex paced the floor, nails clicking against the warped boards, hackles still raised, nose tilted toward the cracks in the wall. Ethan crouched, scanning the room. Old maps curled on the wall, a metal filing cabinet rusted into place, and, blessedly, a radio mounted to the counter. He crossed to it, fingers brushing off dust, and tried the knob. Dead. Of course. The batteries had been stripped years ago. Damn, he muttered. Emily's voice wavered from the corner. They'll break in. They always do. Ethan turned, his eyes hard but not unkind. Then we make them pay for every inch they try to take. She hugged her knees tighter. How? There's too many. He crouched in front of her, lowering his voice. There are 2 kinds of fights, Emily. The ones you win by being stronger, and the ones you win by being smarter. Tonight, we don't have to beat them. We just have to hold until they quit or until help comes. Do you understand? She nodded faintly, her gray eyes trembling but locked on his. Ethan rose and set to work. He dragged the filing cabinet against the back window, wedged the old table under the side door, and gathered loose planks from the floor to reinforce gaps in the walls. Each movement was measured, precise, a man falling back into the rhythm of a battlefield he thought he'd left behind. Rex followed, sniffing every crack, growling at the back door, then the front. He circled Emily twice before settling near her, chest pressed forward, eyes sharp. He didn't bark, not yet. He was saving it. The first blow came minutes later. The front door rattled under a heavy kick, the desk groaning against the frame. Emily gasped, pressing her rabbit to her chest. Rex sprang up, teeth bared, a snarl tearing from his throat that shook the walls. Another kick. The wood splintered. A voice shouted from outside, "Give her up, old man. You can't keep her." Ethan pressed his hand to the desk, steadying it. "Stay calm," he told Emily. "They want you scared. Don't give them that." Her lip trembled. "But I am scared." He glanced at her, his jaw tight. "So am I. That doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with it." The back window shattered suddenly, glass sprang inward. Ethan spun, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. A man's hand groped through the gap, fumbling for a grip. Without hesitation, Ethan swung the heavy flashlight like a hammer, smashing it down on the intruding wrist. The man yelped, jerking back, curses spilling into the night. Rex lunged at the gap, teeth snapping inches from the man's retreating arm. His bark was thunder, a warning, a promise. Emily screamed, then clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. "Good dog," Ethan said, voice low, firm. Rex growled again, pacing before the broken window. The front door shook again, wood cracking, hinges straining. Ethan braced his back against it, his breath ragged. "Emily! Get in the corner, behind the cabinet." She obeyed, scrambling with her rabbit, vanishing into the shadowed wedge. Rex stayed in the open, his body a barrier. The pounding grew louder, faster. The pack was working in unison now, their rage hammering against the station's bones. The walls rattled, dust sifting from the ceiling. Emily's whisper floated from the corner, barely audible. "They'll get in." Ethan grit his teeth. "Maybe. But they'll wish they hadn't." He rattled the bells on his wrist once, sharp. Rex surged forward, planting himself before the door, his roar shaking the room. The next kick splintered the frame. The door sagged inward. Hands clawed through the gap. Ethan raised the flashlight like a club, Rex braced for the fight, Emily praying in the shadows. The ranger station had become a fortress. And tonight, they would hold it, or break with it. The doorframe sobbed under each kick, a deep wooden complaint that carried through the ribs of the station. Dust sifted from the rafters in a fine veil. Somewhere behind the wall, a family of mice made a frantic decision about relocation. Ethan braced his shoulder against the desk and felt the last of the door's integrity travel through his bones like a countdown. "Listen to me," he called toward the shadowed wedge where Emily had folded herself behind the filing cabinet. "If I say crawl, you go to the back, left corner. There's a utility hatch under the shelf. Rex will show you. You wait there until I touch your shoulder." Not a second before. A small voice came back, brittle but present, "Copy." Rex stood in the middle of the floor, not dancing, not lunging, planning. His chest was forward, tail level, ears fixed. He shifted a half-inch to put his body between the door and Emily's hiding place, and then he went still again, the kind of still that makes men hesitate without understanding why. Another kick. The top hinge shrieked. The desk skidded, rubber feet squealing. Ethan slid his boot against a floorboard and felt it flex under age more than stress. This little building had survived wind, snow, vacancy. It did not want to surrender to impatience and cheap bravado. The back window tinkled again, gloved fingers found the sill, a forearm eased through, seeking a latch that didn't exist anymore. Ethan didn't waste a swing this time. He grabbed a rusted map bracket from the wall, heavy, flat, perfect, and drove it down across the intruding wrist. A muffled scream. The arm retreated. The woman's voice, cold, efficient, clipped from outside, "Stop feeding him your hands. Tools only." "Copy that," a man panted, and then the sound of footsteps repositioning, a choreography of angles. They were learning. Ethan was learning, too. The front attackers were the hammer, loud, linear. The back crew were the knife, quiet, clever. If they managed both at once, the station would fold. "Breathe," he told himself, and because he said it to himself, he said it to Emily as well. In for 4, out for 4. Rex's ears twitched. He angled his head toward the roof. Ethan caught it a second later, a new sound above, a dull drag, as if something heavy were being slid across shingles softened by a decade of weather. He pictured a ladder at the rear, a pair of hands testing the rotten lip of the eave. The front door bucked again, the desk thumping into his shoulder. Divide attention, multiply pressure. Smart. "Roof," Ethan said, "to no one and to everyone." Roof? Emily echoed, small and scared. Hey, a man outside crowed at the door, trying on confidence. This is your last chance at easy. Ethan's answer was a quiet rattle of the bells on his wrist. Rex's body sank a fraction, ready. Then the new trick arrived, a fizz, soft, almost polite, and a small cylinder arced through the broken back window, clinking once on the station floor. Smoke! Ethan snapped, already moving. He kicked the thing into a far corner with the side of his boot and stamped a cracked wastebasket over it like a bell over a candle. White vapor coughed under the rim and bled along the baseboards, hugging the floor like a second fog. Not military, he clocked, cheap, acrid, meant to sting eyes and make confusion, not incapacitate. Wet, he said, scanning. No running water. He grabbed the mold-dark tarp from a shelf, shook it, and slapped it against the draft under the door to slow the draw. He ripped a map from the wall, wind contour lines skittering like veins, and jammed it into the window gap where glass had gone missing. Smoke thinned, confused. He coughed once, twice, blinked hard, and found the air again. The roof groaned. Weight above the rafters crept toward the centerline. A boot checked the strength of a joist. Another set of steps scuffed and repositioned near the eave. They weren't jumping through, they were testing for a collapse, or a hole to widen. Emily, Ethan said, voice steady in a way he had to choose. Eyes closed, hand on Rex. I can't see anyway, she whispered, a shaky humor that sounded like bravery in small clothes. The front door hit a final note of surrender. The top hinge spat a screw across the room, it pinged off the filing cabinet and disappeared into dust. The desk slid another inch. The chair leg under the handle screamed against wood and held. For now. Talk to me, old man, the tall voice called from outside, as if this were a social call. Who are you to stand in the way of cash flow? Ethan rocked his weight from his shoulder long enough to answer the only person in the room who needed to hear him. I'm the door, he said, not loudly, not for them. He felt, rather than saw, Emily's head turn toward the words. And Rex is the lock. As if on cue, the shepherd moved, not forward but sideways, calibrating the space. He stopped where the front door's arc would deposit a body and planted his paws, a line drawn on a floor that had seen better days and now saw its best. The roof crew made their decision. A pry bar bit shingles with a wet tearing sound. Old felt ripped. A rectangle of lighter dark appeared in the rafters. One man lay flat, arms and chest through, belly scraping beams as he fished for a foothold on the inside. Ethan rolled the map bracket in his palm, weighing options. If he swung, he could break fingers, maybe by 10 seconds. If he waited, if he let the man commit his weight, the fall would be the punishment. He chose the option that hurt less and ended cleaner. He stepped back 2 paces, eyes on the sagging line above the man's ribs. Now, he breathed, and stomped once on the joist with the heel of his boot, not to break wood, but to introduce truth to a structure already lying to itself. The joist groaned. The man cursed. The pry bar slipped. The rotten lip of the cut roof gave way with a wet rip, and the intruder's center of gravity slid toward his own plan. He dropped. Not all the way, his belt caught him on a nail, jacket tearing, enough to crash to the floor half sideways, shoulder first, breath blasting out of him with a noise like a punctured tire. He flailed once, twice, stunned, and reached for the belt clip where his knife lived. Rex reached the man first. The shepherd did what he had been trained to do for years, he chose space over flesh. He didn't clamp, he controlled. He hit the man's forearm with his chest, thrust him flat, planted a paw high under the man's collarbone, and lowered his head close enough that heat and teeth and intent became the only language left. The man's hand went still like a bird in a snake's shadow. Hands out, Ethan said, level as a horizontal line. Palms down. You move the wrong way, you'll learn a new way to count. The man complied. His breath stuttered, shock arguing with pride. Above, his partner swore and scrambled backward across the torn roofline, reconsidering the physics of heroism. The front door took that moment of divided attention personally. It caved, a flat gasp of wood, and shoved the desk 6 inches. A shoulder forced the gap like a wedge. Fingers curled around the inside of the handle. Crawl! Ethan barked, already moving. Back left. Hatch. Rex didn't need the second command. He peeled off the pin, pivoted, and herded Emily along the wall with his body, nose and shoulders steering without teeth. Emily found the shelf by feel, palms skating over splinters and paint until they found the cool metal lip of a small hatch inset near the floor. She dragged it up. The panel grumbled but cleared. Cool dirt smell breathed out. Go, Ethan said. 2 body lengths in. Face down. Quiet. She wriggled into the crawlspace, small body sliding like a letter into a slot. The rabbit bumped her chin. She hugged it once, hard, and disappeared into the square of dark. Rex pivoted back to the front. The gap at the door widened, and with it, a man's leg, knee, then boot, punched into the room, hunting traction. Ethan stepped and used the flashlight like a lever, jamming the man's shin side on and folding it. No damage, all discouragement. The leg withdrew with a shout. Another arm replaced it, grabbing, blind. Rex's snarl ripped the air and convinced the arm to remember its job was to be part of a body, not a separate creature. Smoke him again, someone yelled from outside, panic finally arriving like a late guest. Another cylinder clinked through the back hole. Ethan kicked it back the way it came, soccer clean, and it arced out into the night with a faint trail. A curse in reply. Watch your hands. Enough, the woman's voice cut, still icy. Pull the hinge. Bring me the chain. We're done asking. Metal rasped. Chain links laid against wood. They were preparing to winch the door off its wounded frame. Smart, again. Time to be smarter. Ethan scanned the room one more time, mind moving through shapes. Filing cabinet. Map bracket. Broken chair. The desk's weight. The torn hole above, open if he wanted it. The crawlspace, a promise he had made to a child and had not made to himself. He exhaled once and set his jaw. Rex, he said, and the dog's ears flicked. Guard. He pointed not at the door, not at the hole, but at the crawlspace hatch. The shepherd moved to it and lay down lengthwise across the opening, chin on paws, eyes on the door. A living lid. If someone got to the back of the room, they'd meet a wall of fur and decision. Ethan slid to the torn roof hole, gathered his legs under him, and jumped. His hands caught the rafters, his shoulders screamed complaint, his elbows locked. He swung his right knee up and hooked it over a beam, pulled with a grunt, and rolled onto what used to be the station's attic, a shallow wedge of splinters, mouse droppings, and cold air. He flattened himself and crawled low to the torn edge where the first intruder had fallen. Outside, 2 shadows crouched at the eave, chain in hand, a third at the doorframe with a pry bar wedged at the surviving hinge. The woman coordinated them with clipped syllables like a metronome, on my count. 1. 2. Ethan shoved his hand through the torn lip, grabbed the chain as it went taut, and wrenched it upward hard, stealing leverage. The men below lurched, momentum failing. The woman spun toward the roofline, eyes flashing under her hood. For the first time all night, she looked surprised. Who are you? She snapped up into the hole, and the question wasn't rhetorical anymore. Wrong man to ask, Ethan said, and let the chain drop, then shoved 2 feet of rotten shingle down like a curtain, blinding their angle. He rolled back before a pry bar could answer. Below, the front door screamed its last and came an inch inward. The chain would buy seconds, not minutes. He scooted to the edge again, found the joist that ran above the doorframe, and stomped once, twice, 3 times, not to break but to warn the wood what was coming. Joints shifted. Nails complained. The door sagged into a geometry that hated being forced. "Push," someone shouted. "Try," Ethan whispered. He slid back to the hole, dropped through with a crunch of dust and splinters, and landed in a crouch. Rex didn't lift his head, just flicked his eyes to say still here. From the crawlspace, he heard the tiniest sound, Emily's breath, held and then released, a promise she was obeying. A siren yelped far off. Not the long wail of patrol on main roads, short, purposeful bursts, cutting through trees. Collins? Rangers? Someone had heard the night telling on itself. "Time's up," Ethan said, and let the sentence stiffen his spine. He stepped to the side of the door, raised the map bracket one more time, and nodded to Rex. The shepherd rose a fraction, muscles bunched, ready to meet the first shape that dared the line. Outside, the woman's voice sharpened, urgency replacing poise. "Forget the door. Back. Back to the road." Boots scraped. Chain slithered. The pressure thinned, then flared fast as a last attempt, a shoulder testing one final shove. The door jumped and held. Ethan didn't chase the retreat. He didn't celebrate. He listened, to the fading footfalls, to the roof shedding grit, to the crawlspace hush, to the siren pulling closer. He looked at Rex. "Hold." The dog rested his chin back on his paws across the hatch, as if he'd always belonged there, as if for all the strangeness of this night, he had finally found the exact job the world had built him for. Outside, the woods began telling a different story, the story of men who had run out of plans and run into daylight. And inside, a girl in the dark counted her breaths, not to measure terror anymore, but to measure the time between now and the moment a hand would tap her shoulder and say out. The ranger station fell quiet, though it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of men pulling back into shadows, of boots crunching in the distance, of the forest digesting the chaos and returning to its natural rhythms one heartbeat at a time. Ethan didn't trust it. Silence was a tool, he knew, because he'd used it himself. He crouched beside the crawlspace hatch and rapped the wood twice, soft but steady. "Clear for now," he murmured. "Come out." Rex shifted to the side, but didn't leave the hatch entirely, his body still angled like a door with hinges made of muscle. Emily wriggled out, her hair tangled with cobwebs, her rabbit clutched so tightly it seemed stretched. She blinked at the faint moonlight filtering through the cracks in the boards. "Are they gone?" Ethan glanced at Rex. The shepherd's ears flicked, his nose lifting. He wasn't relaxed, but he wasn't bristling anymore either. "For now," Ethan said. Emily sank to the floor beside Rex, resting her forehead against his fur. "They'll come back," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "They will. But not tonight. They lost the element of surprise. That means they'll regroup. That means we have time." "Time for what?" she asked, looking up at him. "Time to move smarter than they do," Ethan said. His eyes flicked toward the torn hole in the roof, then to the door sagging in its frame. "This place is burned. We can't hold it twice." The girl's shoulders slumped. "Then where?" Ethan thought of the map in his head, Fire Road curling back toward the county line, the creek cutting east toward the dam, the ridge running north to the lookout tower. The tower, yes, it was a ruin, but higher ground meant sight lines, meant radio range, meant no surprises. It would be a climb, but it was the only place that offered both visibility and the chance to signal help. "The old lookout," he said. "North Ridge." Emily's eyes widened. "That's far." "Far enough to matter," Ethan said. "And we're not alone." As if on cue, the siren they'd heard earlier caught closer. Tires skidded on gravel outside. A beam of white light sliced through the cracks in the boards. A familiar voice barked, "Sheriff's office." "Ethan, you in there?" Relief shuddered through Ethan's chest. "Collins," he called back. "Inside." One child, one dog, 3 tangos retreated. The door creaked as deputies forced it open, the chain clattering loose. Flashlights pierced the gloom, landing on Ethan, Emily, and Rex. Collins stepped in first, his vest dusty, his jaw tight. His eyes scanned the wreckage, the broken window, the sagging door, the shattered smoke canister still smoldering under the trash bin. "Hell," Collins muttered. Then, softer, "You held." Ethan straightened, exhaustion tugging at his shoulders but not his voice. "Barely." Collins knelt near Emily. His tone shifted, softer, gentler. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. We've got you." Emily pressed tighter against Rex, her eyes darting toward the broken window. "No," she whispered. "They're still out here." Collins frowned, glancing at Ethan. "She's not wrong. We caught 2 in the woods. A 3rd slipped the perimeter. The woman, we didn't get close." "They'll regroup," Ethan said grimly. "They're not amateurs. They're hunting her for a reason, and they won't stop until that reason's gone." Collins looked back at Emily, then at Ethan. "We'll take her into protective custody. Move her to county safehouse until—" "No," Emily cut in suddenly, her voice sharp despite the tremor. "Not the safehouse. They'll find me. They always do." Collins looked stunned by the interruption. Ethan crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Emily. Why do you believe that?" She shook her head, tears brimming. Because they have people. Everywhere. They watch. They follow. The safe house won't stop them." Ethan held her gaze, then glanced at Collins. "She's not guessing. She knows." Collins rubbed his jaw. "So what then? We can't just run with her." "We don't run," Ethan said. "We climb." Collins frowned. "Climb?" "The North Ridge Lookout," Ethan explained. "It's out of their comfort zone, high ground, no cover, no approach without being seen. And the tower's old, but the beacon rig might still work. Even if it doesn't, visibility means we can signal. It buys time." Collins hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right. But I'll need to clear it with command." Ethan shook his head. "No time. They'll come back before dawn. We move now." Emily's voice was small, but steady. "He's still out here," she whispered again. "I can feel it." Rex growled low, ears pinned toward the tree line. The deputies stiffened, weapons angled. The night outside seemed to lean closer, as if listening. Collins cursed softly. "All right. North Ridge it is. Let's move." They stepped back into the night, the cold air wrapping them like a shroud. The forest felt different now, angry, unsettled, waiting. Ethan adjusted his grip on the flashlight, glanced at Rex, then at Emily. "Stay close," he said. "The path is guarded." And together, with the dog leading and the girl's whisper still echoing, they turned toward the ridge, where the next test waited. The trek to the North Ridge was worse than Ethan remembered. The forest, already dense, seemed to close in around them, every branch and root a potential tripwire. The ground had been churned by recent rains, turning the path into a slick ribbon of mud. Ethan moved first, Rex flanking him on the left, muscles coiled, nose twitching. Behind him, Emily clutched her rabbit tightly, stepping carefully on the slick stones and tangled roots. Collins and 2 deputies brought up the rear, scanning the shadows like hawks. Every sound made Ethan flinch. A snapping twig. A distant rustle. Even the wind in the trees felt deliberate. The attackers weren't far. That much was certain. He could feel it in the tension of the night. The forest seemed to bend toward them, pressing against their movement, whispering threats through the branches. Emily's voice broke the silence. "It's so high," she said, looking up the ridge. How will we make it? You don't have to understand, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. You just have to survive it. Rex barked softly, a warning, then stopped suddenly, ears forward. Ethan froze and followed the dog's gaze. In the moonlight, shadows shifted unnaturally. Movement, quick, deliberate, hidden behind thick undergrowth. Ethan's pulse accelerated. They're here, he whispered. Collins raised a hand. Positions, he ordered, voice barely above a growl. The deputies adjusted, weapons raised, scanning left and right. Emily pressed herself closer to Ethan, trembling but silent. The attackers had split. Two were flanking the left side of the ridge, moving silently through the trees, while one remained behind to monitor the path they'd come from. Ethan's mind raced. They had the advantage of preparation, familiarity with the terrain, but he had Rex, he had Emily, and he had instinct honed from years of survival. Rex, Ethan murmured. Lead the girl. Watch the shadows. The dog moved to position himself slightly ahead of Emily, low to the ground, ears twitching, teeth bared. They climbed, each step a battle against gravity and fear. Roots snagged boots, stones shifted unexpectedly, and every sound was magnified in the silence of the night. Yet the ridge seemed endless. The tower remained a pinprick of black against the sky, smaller than Ethan had imagined from a distance but imposing all the same. Suddenly, a rustle erupted to their left. Two attackers burst from the underbrush, knives drawn. One shouted, a jagged, inhuman bark, while the other lunged toward Emily. Rex sprang without hesitation. His powerful body collided with the first attacker, teeth sinking into a forearm, a growl so deep it vibrated through the air. Ethan fired his sidearm once, the shot cracking like lightning, forcing the second assailant back into the shadows. Emily screamed, but Ethan's hand was already on her shoulder, guiding her behind the protective wall of a boulder. Collins and the deputies fanned out, weapon muzzles steady, eyes wide with adrenaline. The attackers retreated temporarily, but their intent was clear. They were testing the group, probing weaknesses, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Ethan exhaled slowly. Keep moving, he ordered. No hesitation. North Tower now. Step on nothing but solid ground. Rex, stay close. The climb grew steeper, the moonlight sparse, the ridge jagged. Each step forward was measured, deliberate, like threading a needle with your own life hanging from it. Branches tore at clothing, slick mud tugged at boots, and the cold air bit through layers of sweat. Emily's voice was a whisper. He's watching. I can feel it. Ethan didn't respond, but he understood. That whispered certainty, the girl's uncanny awareness, had saved them more than once. He felt it too, the eyes in the darkness, the presence that lingered on the periphery. Every instinct screamed that the attackers were not just men, they were something more methodical, more patient, more relentless. Finally, the ground leveled. The base of the old lookout tower emerged from the forest, metal and wood corroded but standing firm, a relic from decades past. Ethan surveyed it quickly. The structure was rusted in places, the stairs squeaking ominously under weight, the windows barred but some glass panes broken. The tower offered visibility, height, and a choke point, advantages they desperately needed. Up there, Ethan said, pointing. We make the climb, secure the tower. Once inside, we hold until dawn, or until help arrives. The deputies grunted in agreement, moving in formation. Ethan lifted Emily onto his shoulders, careful of the balance, careful of every step. Rex trotted beside them, alert, growling at every shadow. Halfway up the stairs, a shot rang out from below. A bullet embedded itself in the wood at Ethan's feet, splintering the step. They're close. Collins shouted, ducking instinctively. Ethan gritted his teeth. Keep climbing. Don't give them the ground. The attackers emerged from cover, moving up the slope in a coordinated advance. 2 men, one with a rifle, the other with a hatchet, eyes wild, intent clear. They had underestimated the group's resolve. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to secure the tower first. Then they could fight from an advantage. Rex lunged, teeth bared, growling, forcing the first attacker back. Ethan fired twice, hitting nothing but air, then ducked as the rifle barked again. The tower stairs shook under the barrage. Emily clung tight, frightened but silent, trusting Ethan and Rex implicitly. Finally, they reached the top platform. Ethan barricaded the door with a rusted support beam, Collins covering the lower windows with what debris they could find. The night stretched on, the forest alive with distant shouts and the crunch of boots on undergrowth. Emily hugged Rex, her small body shivering, and whispered once more, "He's still out here." Rex's ears twitched. Ethan knew she wasn't guessing. Something in the darkness had eyes on them still. And the night was far from over. The first pale streaks of dawn barely cut through the thick canopy when Ethan finally allowed himself to exhale. The night had been a relentless battle of nerves, strategy, and survival instincts, but the tower, ancient and battered, had become their fortress. Rex lay low beside Emily, every muscle coiled and ready, ears twitching at the faintest sounds below. The girl's small hands clutched her rabbit tightly, but her eyes were wide and alert, scanning the surrounding trees as if she could sense what Ethan could not yet see. "They won't make another move, not yet," Ethan whispered, more to steady himself than anyone else. "They're waiting, watching. Timing is everything." Emily's voice, quiet but insistent, cut through the tension. "He's still out there." Ethan's gaze followed her line of sight, but the forest looked empty. Still, the hair on the back of his neck prickled. There was a presence, patient and unseen, calculating the right moment to strike. He realized then that Emily's intuition, her whispered knowledge, had saved them multiple times this night. It was uncanny, almost preternatural. Collins, crouched near the tower's railing, spoke softly but firmly. "Ethan, what do you want to do now? We've held them off, but the sun's coming up. We can't stay here forever." Ethan's mind raced. He knew retreat wasn't an option. They had no ground to give without exposing Emily. And the attackers weren't reckless. They would continue their hunt until either the girl was captured or someone forced their hand. "We hold," Ethan said at last. "Rex, stay alert. Emily, keep low. Collins, cover the southern approach. Deputies, check the north ridge every 5 minutes. They'll try to split us, and we can't let that happen." Hours dragged on. The forest beneath them whispered in the wind, the only sound other than distant bird calls and the occasional snap of a branch. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, every rustle a potential threat. The adrenaline that had carried them through the night began to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its place, but Ethan's focus never wavered. Suddenly, a figure appeared, creeping along a ridge ledge some 50 feet below. Ethan tensed, spotting the glint of metal, a rifle barrel catching the first faint light. "They're moving," he muttered, signaling with a hand to Collins. Rex's growl rumbled like distant thunder. Emily instinctively pressed closer to Ethan, whispering, "He's here." "I know it." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't guessing. She could feel him. The one orchestrating this hunt had been nearby the whole night, unseen, patient, calculating. The figure froze, scanning the tower. Ethan raised his binoculars, confirming the silhouette, a man, tall and wiry, with a scar running down one cheek, eyes sharp and cold. This was the ringleader, the one who had kept Emily in his sights, manipulating the other attackers, setting the traps. "All right," Ethan said, voice low but steady. "We end this now." He turned to Collins and the deputies. "Prepare for engagement. Wait for my mark. Do not fire until I give the word. Everyone clear?" A chorus of grunts confirmed readiness. Ethan's gaze returned to Emily. "Stay behind me. Trust Rex. The girl nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. She whispered again, almost to herself, "He's coming closer, but he doesn't see us yet." Ethan nodded. It was all down to timing. One false move and they could be overwhelmed. Then, as if on cue, the ringleader began climbing the ridge toward the tower, moving quickly but cautiously, aware of the risk. Ethan could see every muscle tensed, every decision measured. He raised his sidearm, finger on the trigger, eyes never leaving the approaching figure. "Now," he hissed. Rex sprang, a blur of fur and muscle, launching down the stairs in a controlled leap. The ringleader barely had time to react before the dog collided with him, teeth snapping, growls reverberating through the air. The man staggered, rifle clattering, scrambling to regain control. Ethan fired, a sharp crack that echoed down the ridge. The ringleader fell back, sprawling into the mud, eyes wide with disbelief. Emily's whispered intuition had guided them perfectly. She had sensed his approach and prepared them for the attack before he even revealed himself. The other attackers, seeing their leader incapacitated, hesitated, then bolted. The first rush of morning light revealed their retreating forms, disappearing into the forest. Ethan exhaled, relief and exhaustion battling for dominance in his chest. Emily slid to the ground, tears of fear and relief mingling, hugging Rex tightly. "He's gone," she whispered, voice shaking but filled with awe. Ethan crouched beside her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "For now," he said. "But they won't try again, not after that." Collins approached, breathing heavily. "You did it," he said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "All of you. The girl, the dog, you survived the night." Ethan allowed himself a brief smile. "We survived together. That's what matters." The first rays of sun broke over the horizon, spilling golden light through the broken windows of the tower. The forest below glimmered with dew, mist curling between trees, painting the landscape in an ethereal glow. Birds began their morning chorus, the world waking as if nothing had happened, but Ethan knew better. Emily sat with Rex at her side, watching the sun rise. "He's still out there," she murmured softly. Ethan smiled, squeezing her shoulder. "Maybe," he said. "But right now, we're safe." And we climbed higher than fear. Rex barked once, sharp and proud, ears pricked toward the receding shadows. Emily hugged the dog, whispering a soft, grateful, "Thank you." For the first time since the night began, Ethan felt a shift. They had faced hunters, survived traps, and ascended the ridge, but the greatest victory wasn't the defeat of the attackers. It was the bond formed in the crucible of fear, the trust between man, girl, and dog, the instinct and courage that had seen them through, the whispered warnings that had saved their lives. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth, and Ethan realized that, although the shadows might return, some light could never be taken away. Together, they watched the sunrise, a silent promise that the world was still theirs to defend, and that courage, often small, often quiet, was stronger than any hunter lurking in the dark.